You know, it might surprise you, but the land we now call Iran actually played host to some of the most well-known stories in the Bible. Yes, a number of biblical figures lived in what's now Iran. While it might seem a bit odd given the current tensions in the region, the modern-day country of Iran sits on parts of ancient Persia and Media, a territory of immense historical and biblical importance. Long before God's modern name, this land was home to powerful kingdoms that were major players in the ancient world and, consequently, in the biblical narrative. Ancient roots in biblical history, for instance, in southwest Iran, you'd find the ancient kingdom of Elam, which existed as far back as the time of the patriarchs and judges of Israel. But this region really took center stage in the Bible with the rise of the Medo-Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great. This empire not only dominated and shaped the geopolitics of the ancient Middle East, but also became an instrument of God himself in guiding his people. Because of this, prophets, kings, and Jewish leaders had encounters with divine purpose in cities now located within Iran's borders. In this video, we'll explore 3 biblical stories that unfolded in that region, showing how the territory of modern-day Iran was a stage for decisions that profoundly impacted the history of God's people. 1. The decree of Cyrus and the rebuilding of the temple. Our first story takes place during the reign of Darius I of Persia, in the context of the Jews' return from Babylonian exile. For those unfamiliar, during the reign of Nebuchadnezzar II, Jerusalem was conquered and a large part of Judah's population was deported. Then, after the time determined by God, as announced by his prophets, the people of Judah were finally able to return to their homeland. The story of the Jews' return from Babylonian exile is one of the most significant in the Bible, and began with a surprising character who wasn't even an Israelite. We're talking about Cyrus the Great, king of Persia, born in Anshan on the Iranian plateau, in the southwest of modern-day Iran. Cyrus is remembered not only for his political role as a founder of the Persian Empire, but also for his policy of religious tolerance and respect for the cultures of conquered peoples. In 539 BCE, Cyrus conquered Babylon, which had previously deported thousands of Jews during Nebuchadnezzar's reign. With Persian rule, the policy toward exiled peoples changed drastically. Cyrus allowed various nations to return to their lands and rebuild their temples, a strategic move that also helped secure the loyalty of the peoples under his rule. To give you an idea of how Cyrus's religious policy worked, to the Babylonians, he presented himself as a son of Marduk, a Babylonian deity, while to the Jews, Cyrus showed reverence for the God of Israel, and so on. This policy is recorded not only in the Bible, but also in historical documents like the Cyrus Cylinder, a famous archaeological artifact discovered in Babylon, which describes how Cyrus restored temples and allowed deported peoples to return. One of these beneficiaries was the Jewish people. However, time passed, and during the reign of Darius I, there was some opposition to the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. Some Persian officials began to question the legitimacy of the work. The Jews explained to the Persian officials that the reconstruction had been authorized by a decree from Cyrus, issued in his first year of reign. Not satisfied, the Persian officials sent a letter to King Darius, asking for this story to be verified. The Book of Ezra, which recounts the Jewish people's return to Jerusalem, records that Darius ordered a search of the royal archives of the empire to locate any document confirming the truth of Cyrus's order. A search was conducted in the royal archives where the treasures of Babylon were kept. It was found in Ecbatana, in the fortress that is in the province of Media, a scroll on which it was written that King Cyrus had indeed decreed the rebuilding of the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem, and that the expenses would be covered by the royal house. Furthermore, the utensils confiscated by Nebuchadnezzar and taken to Babylon were also to be returned to the temple in Jerusalem. Ecbatana, where this decree was found, was likely the famous Ecbatana, one of the royal capitals of the Persian Empire, located in the Media region. The city was almost 500 kilometers northeast of Babylon and corresponds today to the Iranian city of Hamadan, located 400 kilometers from Tehran. The choice of Ecbatana to store such a crucial document demonstrates its importance as an administrative center and an official depository of imperial records at that time. Scholars also debate whether Cyrus's decree was issued in Ecbatana or merely stored there. Some believe Cyrus might have given this order while he was locally in the city itself, while others argue that Cyrus must have issued this decree when he was in Babylon. Either way, The exact location isn't certain, as Persian kings, especially Cyrus, were constantly traveling throughout the empire. Cyrus's recognition as an agent of God's divine plan often surprises Bible readers. In the book of Isaiah, for example, God calls Cyrus my anointed, an expression often reserved for the kings of Israel. This shows how God's sovereign action can manifest through foreign kings to fulfill his purposes. In the same way, Ecbatana, a city located in the heart of modern-day Iran, became the scene of a significant event in the restoration of God's people, preserving the document that authorized the exiled Jews to rebuild the Temple of the Lord in Jerusalem, over 370 kilometers away from Ecbatana. 2. The story of Esther and Susa, over 370 kilometers from Ecbatana, was the ancient Persian city of Susa, the setting for our second story in what is now Iran. Without a doubt, among the most well-known books of the Bible is Esther, whose dramatic and engaging narrative unfolds entirely in Susa. The city of Susa was located in modern-day southwestern Iran and was one of the most important capitals of the Persian Empire during the reign of several kings, including Ahasuerus, Esther's husband, whom many scholars identify as Xerxes I. Susa was an imposing city in the region of Elam, near the Ulai River, mentioned in the book of Daniel. It served as a winter capital for Persian kings due to its milder climate compared to other parts of the empire. It also housed a magnificent royal palace whose ruins were discovered and excavated in the 19th century. Susa is also mentioned several times in the book of Esther as a citadel, indicating both its nature as a fortified city and its role as an administrative and royal complex. The book of Esther narrates how a young Jewish woman named Hadassah, known by her Persian name Esther, became queen of the empire after Queen Vashti's dethronement. She was chosen by King Ahasuerus from many young virgins brought from various parts of the empire. However, the story takes a critical turn when Haman, a high-ranking official of the king, plotted the destruction of the Jews throughout the empire. Unaware that Queen Esther was Jewish, Haman obtained a royal decree authorizing the extermination of the people on a specific date. The biblical text states that, guided by her cousin and guardian Mordecai, Esther courageously acted to change the destiny of her people. After fasting for 3 days, she entered the king's presence without being summoned, a dangerous act that could have resulted in her death. However, Ahasuerus received her favorably, and Esther revealed her Jewish origin and exposed Haman's conspiracy. Haman's terrible plan failed, and the Jews were authorized to defend themselves. The deliverance brought about by God through Esther led to the institution of the Feast of Purim, celebrated by Jews as a memorial of the salvation that occurred in those days. In this sense, the story of Esther shows how the faithfulness and courage of one person can impact an entire nation, even in foreign lands. It's true that the book of Esther doesn't directly mention God's name, but his providence is evident in every detail of the story, from Esther's ascent to Haman's fall. And as we've already said, the backdrop for this entire story was Iranian territory, where Susa was located. 3. Nehemiah's mission from Susa, but the city of Susa wasn't just a setting for Esther's story. Years later, it was also the starting point for the mission of another very important biblical figure, Nehemiah, the protagonist of our third story. The book in the Bible that bears Nehemiah's name describes his journey as a Jew in a prominent position at the Persian court, and later as governor of Judah, responsible for rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. Nehemiah's account begins with a clear geographical and historical indication. The text says in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year of the reign of Artaxerxes I, Nehemiah was in the citadel of Susa. This corresponds to November or December of 446 BCE. At this time, Nehemiah was serving the palace of King Artaxerxes I, son of Xerxes I, who was likely the Ahasuerus of the book of Esther. Nehemiah held a position of extreme trust. He was a king's cupbearer, meaning he was responsible for tasting drinks before the monarch consumed them, a role that demanded loyalty and proximity to royalty. It was in this Persian context that Nehemiah received distressing news. The walls of Jerusalem were still broken down, and the city remained vulnerable even after the return of many Jews. Deeply distressed, Nehemiah mourned, fasted, prayed, and then wisely asked the king for permission to return to Jerusalem. When the Persian monarch perceived his sadness, Artaxerxes not only allowed Nehemiah's journey, but also provided letters of support and resources to help him. This interaction shows the degree of trust Nehemiah had gained in the court and how God's hand once again worked through Persian kings. We know that Nehemiah was the man God used to lead the rebuilding of Jerusalem's city walls in the post-exilic period. Nehemiah was not a prophet or a priest, but a faithful public servant who became a strategic leader in national reconstruction. The mention of Susa as a place where Nehemiah received his calling reveals another direct connection between the Bible and Iranian territory. Susa, as one of the administrative centers, was where important imperial decisions were made that impacted not only Persia, but also distant provinces like Judea. Therefore, fundamental political and religious decisions for the Jewish people were made in an area that is now Iran. Another interesting mention of the city of Susa in the Bible occurs in the book of Daniel, describing the occasion when the prophet had one of his most important visions. The biblical text records that during the vision, Daniel found himself in the fortified palace of Susa by the Ulai River. In Daniel's day, Susa was the capital of Elam, but it's not possible to know for certain if, at that time, Elam was an independent state or a nation allied with Babylon or Media. Whatever the case, it seems that the prophet Daniel was transported on a visionary journey to a place hundreds of kilometers from Babylon. There, through symbolic images of a ram and a goat, Daniel saw the fall of the Medo-Persian Empire before the Greek Empire, and also the subsequent fragmentation of the Greek Empire into 4 kingdoms after Alexander the Great. The fact that Daniel found himself transported to Susa in his vision, even before the Persian Empire took control of Babylon, indicated the prophetic relevance of that city. This suggests that God was already setting the stage for the future, in which Persia would play a decisive role in the destiny of the Jewish people. Today, the ruins of Susa are located in the Iranian province of Khuzestan, near the border with Iraq. The site houses archaeological excavations that confirm the existence of a Persian palace, possibly built by Darius I and expanded by Xerxes, exactly as described in the book of Esther. Beyond the main stories, beyond the stories directly linked to Ecbatana and Susa in the Hebrew canon of the Old Testament, other cities located in Iranian territory are also mentioned in apocryphal or deuterocanonical books accepted by Catholics and Orthodox. For example, in the book of Tobit, the city of Rages of Media, located in northern modern-day Iran, appears as a place where Abias went to recover a sum of silver for his father from a man named Gabael. Furthermore, in the same book, Tobit's wife is also mentioned as living in Ecbatana. The second book of Maccabees, which provides interesting information about the historical context of the intertestamental period, recounts that the Seleucid king Antiochus IV Epiphanes tried to plunder the temple located in ancient Persepolis but was driven out by the population. This city was the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Empire and was located in modern-day southern Iran, in the Fars province, which today houses impressive archaeological ruins. Many other historical, archaeological, and literary evidences indicate that a significant Jewish community remained on Persian soil for centuries, even after the return from exile. These Jews lived under various empires that succeeded each other in the region, maintaining synagogues and centers of study. Therefore, the region where modern-day Iran is located was, in the past, a setting where God revealed visions, raised foreign leaders as instruments of his plan, and preserved his people even amidst the world's great empires.